When I saw her sitting in my favorite chair, sipping tea as if she owned the place, something inside me shattered. That was the moment I realized my sister had crossed a line I never thought she would. I stared at her, the steam from her cup curling lazily in the morning light, and felt a strange mix of disbelief, hurt, and anger. She smiled at me, that same smile I once trusted, and for a second, I felt like a stranger in my own home. It all started slowly, the kind of creeping unease you notice only when it's too late. But in that moment, seeing her confidence, her quiet claim over everything we had built together, I knew the truth. My sister didn't just love me, she wanted everything I owned. I wanted to scream, to throw the cup across the room, but I just sat there. My heart pounded in my chest, the tick of the antique clock on the wall echoing louder than it ever had. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, smell the lingering scent of last night's dinner, her favorite roast chicken, the aroma of garlic and rosemary still clinging to the air. It was all too ordinary, too domestic, and yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. I thought about my husband, gone only 6 months now, leaving a hole in our lives that no one could fill. He had been my anchor, my partner in everything, and now, as I watched my sister's casual dominance, I realized she had been quietly plotting while I mourned. The betrayal cut deeper than any grief I had known. Before all this, life had been simple, in its own quiet way. I had been married for 25 years to Michael, a kind and steady man who always knew how to make me laugh even on the worst days. Our house smelled of vanilla from the candles I liked to burn every evening, the sound of the old record player filling the living room as Michael tinkered in his workshop. My sister, Laura, had always been part of that rhythm. She was 10 years younger than me, and for as long as I could remember, I had been her protector. I had guided her through school, helped her find her first job, and even let her live with me during a rough patch in her 20s. She was my little sister, but sometimes, I felt more like her mother. I ran a small home-based bakery, something Michael and I had dreamed of starting together. It was modest, but it was ours. The smell of freshly baked bread and cinnamon rolls became a signature in our neighborhood. Laura loved to help at first. She was good at frosting cupcakes and packaging cookies for delivery, and I had been proud to teach her every step. Evenings were my favorite. I would sit in the kitchen, peeling apples for pies while Michael read in the living room. Laura would often come home from work and join us, laughing about her day, sometimes helping clean up or sharing stories. It felt safe, warm, a family bubble I didn't realize could burst so easily. But even in those peaceful days, there were small things I should have noticed. The way Laura lingered in my home office, pretending to organize while scanning documents I had never thought to lock. The casual questions about our savings, our property, just curious, she would say, her tone light but probing. I dismissed it. I trusted her. I thought she was family. Michael's passing changed everything. The grief left me fragile, and Laura's presence became more constant, almost invasive. She started offering to handle bills, manage appointments, even help with the bakery. I welcomed it at first, too weary to notice her as lingering on the ledger longer than necessary, or the way she subtly critiqued my decisions, as if guiding me towards something I couldn't yet see. It was during these months that I began to feel a gnawing sense of unease. I noticed that friends I had known for years started taking her side in casual remarks. Laura seems so helpful, they would say. Are you letting her run things for you? And I, blinded by familial love, brushed it off. It didn't make sense to me that she would turn on me, not Laura, my little sister, the one I had loved fiercely, even when she made mistakes. The first real clue that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning, unremarkable except for the letter on my kitchen counter. It was from the bank, addressed to me, but the envelope was slightly crumpled, almost as if someone had handled it before I saw it. I opened it and found a notice about an account transfer, one I hadn't authorized. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I called the bank, but after a series of confusing statements and back-and-forth explanations, a chilling possibility formed in my mind. Laura had been managing some of my accounts in my absence. I had allowed her to help, thinking it was harmless, and it looked like she had started moving things around. I confronted her gently that evening. I wanted to believe in her. "Laura," I said, keeping my voice calm, "did you handle anything with my accounts?" She smiled, a warm, innocent smile. "Oh, just the usual, helping you pay bills." "You know me, I hate paperwork," she said, her hands brushing crumbs off the counter as she spoke. Her tone was casual, unbothered, and it made my stomach twist, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few days, I noticed more subtle signs: packages I didn't order arriving at our house, calls from clients about invoices I hadn't sent. My sister would laugh it off, dismiss it as a misunderstanding, but my intuition screamed otherwise. I began keeping notes, tracking conversations, receipts, small discrepancies. Each time I tried to confront her, she deflected, sometimes with charm, sometimes with quiet hurt, which made me question my own suspicions. Was I imagining it? Could my grief be clouding my judgment? And then, one evening, I came home from the bakery to find her in the living room, holding a brochure for a property I had been considering selling, one that had sentimental value, part of our family home. "I thought you might like some advice," she said casually. But the way she looked at the brochure, her eyes calculating, the subtle tightening of her lips, made my chest clench. Something was wrong. I didn't know it yet, but Laura had been planning this for months. Every act of helpfulness, every gentle suggestion, was a step toward taking everything I held dear. And in that moment, my heart began to prepare for the heartbreak I didn't yet fully understand. It wasn't until late one rainy afternoon that the full extent of Laura's betrayal became clear. I had stayed late at the bakery, the smell of sugar and vanilla clinging to my clothes, the soft hum of the mixer fading as the last batch of cinnamon rolls cooled on the rack. When I returned home, the house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that prickles your skin. I noticed immediately that the living room felt different. The cushions were slightly rearranged, papers I had left on the coffee table were stacked neatly, but not in my handwriting. And then I saw it, my laptop, open, sitting on the desk in the corner, the screen still glowing. A file was minimized, one I hadn't seen before, a spreadsheet detailing accounts, property deeds, and legal documents. My name was there, yes, but so was hers. And worse, her handwriting annotations suggested she had been transferring ownership, redirecting money, and even contacting my clients under the guise of my authority. I froze, the rain outside tapping steadily against the window. My chest felt tight, and a low, shuddering gasp escaped me. I couldn't believe it. Laura, my sister, my little sister, she had been quietly orchestrating this entire takeover. The months of helpfulness, the casual advice, the little digs disguised as concern, it had all been a calculated plan. I confronted her immediately. "Laura, what is this?" My voice trembled, but I forced myself to remain steady. She looked up from her cup of tea, calm as ever, almost amused. "Oh, that. Just some things I thought you might not have time for. You know, managing everything on your own can be stressful," she said lightly, as if discussing the weather. I felt my throat tighten. "This isn't managing, Laura. You've been moving money, signing documents, contacting clients. This is stealing. This is taking everything I worked for, everything Dad and Michael left me." Her expression softened, the mask slipping just slightly. "I love you, you know that. I just thought I could help. Maybe I was too ambitious, but I only wanted the best for us." I could feel my blood boil. The best for us? Or the best for you? Because it looks an awful lot like you've been trying to push me out of my own life. Tears pricked my eyes, not just from anger but from the sheer betrayal. She had always been my little sister. I had raised her, guided her, forgiven her mistakes, and this was how she repaid me. Over the next few hours, I pored through every file, every email, every document she had touched. The pattern was undeniable. She had been systematically trying to gain control of my bakery, my house, my bank accounts, and even the small inheritance from Dad that I had thought would secure my future. Every smile, every hug, every "I'm just helping" had been part of a strategy to edge me out. The heartbreak was sharp, but clarity came with it. I realized I couldn't let this continue. I had to act, but carefully. Anger alone wouldn't be enough. I needed proof, I needed strategy. And most importantly, I needed to preserve my dignity. I spent the next week quietly gathering evidence. I revisited all the transactions, copied emails, took screenshots, and even discreetly spoke to a few clients who had received strange invoices or payments from Laura. Each conversation confirmed my suspicions. Laura had been running circles around me, leveraging my grief, my trust, and my protective instincts to slowly claim everything I had. I decided to confront her one evening, but not with rage. I invited her for tea, just the two of us, and prepared myself mentally. My hands shook as I poured the tea, the steam curling in the dim light, mingling with the scent of vanilla from the candles I always kept burning. "Laura," I began, keeping my voice calm, "we need to talk about everything." She smiled faintly, trying to appear casual. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I placed the printed documents on the table, sliding them toward her. "These are things I discovered while checking the accounts and documents, things you've done without my consent. Care to explain?" Her eyes flickered, a brief flash of guilt that quickly hardened into defiance. I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I trusted you," I said softly, the tremor in my voice betraying my hurt. "I let you into every part of my life, and you used that trust to take everything from me." "Why?" She hesitated, biting her lip. I thought you would understand. I wanted a better life, for both of us. I thought if I just guided things, you wouldn't have to worry. I didn't know it would hurt you." I took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. She was admitting something, not full responsibility, but a crack in her armor. "You didn't just hurt me, Laura. You tried to erase me. But I'm not going to let that happen." I outlined a plan. I would confront clients, secure legal advice, and protect my property. But I did it without anger overtaking me, using only facts, calm reasoning, and documented evidence. Laura protested, tried to manipulate the narrative, but each time, I had proof. Slowly, I began to see cracks in her confidence. That evening, after she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, the ticking clock loud in the silence. The ache in my chest had softened, replaced with a sense of purpose. I realized that reclaiming my life wouldn't just be about the property or the bakery, it would be about asserting boundaries, protecting what I loved, and showing myself that I deserved respect. The next few weeks were tense but deliberate. I began sharing pieces of the truth with those around me, quietly, carefully. First, with my loyal bakery clients. I called them one by one, explaining that some communications may have been sent under false pretenses and confirming that I alone would be managing all orders and payments moving forward. Their shock turned to concern, and then to support. A few even admitted that Laura had called them, asking questions about accounts or trying to take over orders. It was proof in plain sight. Then came the family meeting, the one I had dreaded but knew was necessary. I invited Laura, my cousins, and a few close family friends to the house. I didn't want it to turn into a scene, but I needed witnesses, people who could see the pattern, hear the lies, and witness the truth. "Laura," I began, calm and measured, "I want to show everyone what has been happening over the past few months." Her eyes flickered, a mixture of defensiveness and fear. I don't think this is necessary," she said, voice tight. "It is necessary," I replied, my tone steady. "Because this is about respect, honesty, and the trust one placed in you." I laid out the documents, the emails, the spreadsheets, the invoices, one by one, explaining how she had manipulated situations, subtly taken control of accounts, and even misled family members about decisions that were mine alone. I watched her face as each fact sank in. The proud, confident mask she wore so easily began to crumble. The room was silent, heavy with tension. My cousins murmured quietly to each other, nodding, some shaking their heads in disbelief. My closest friend, someone who had known the history between Laura and me, whispered, "I had my suspicions, but this is unbelievable." Laura tried to defend herself, offering excuses, claiming she just wanted to help, but the calm presentation of facts left her words hollow. There was no room for manipulation anymore. By the end of the meeting, the moral weight of her actions was visible, not just in her shameful posture, but in the quiet disapproval of everyone she had hoped would remain neutral. The consequences didn't stop there. Word spread slowly but surely among the neighborhood and our social circles. Clients who had worked with Laura realized the discrepancies and withdrew their support from her initiatives. Friends who had been subtly influenced by her charm began to question her motives. Laura's carefully constructed image of benevolence and helpfulness was unraveling. Through it all, I remained composed. I had no desire for public humiliation or vengeance. My goal had never been to punish her for spectacle. It was to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to restore integrity to my home, my work, and my life. And as the days passed, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a restoration of balance that was both moral and emotional. Once the dust settled, life slowly returned to a new rhythm. I took full control of the bakery again, re-establishing connections with clients, checking every order, every payment personally. The house felt like home once more, not in the same way it had before, but in a way that felt secure. Laura's presence became minimal. She reached out a few times, trying to rebuild bridges, but I had learned the hard lesson of boundaries. Forgiveness was possible, but trust had to be earned, and I was no longer the sister who would blindly hand over her life to someone else's ambition. I also leaned heavily on my support system, friends, neighbors, and family members who had stood by me during this ordeal. They reminded me that grief and vulnerability do not have to be exploited, and that even after betrayal, one can find strength. Their presence was comforting, like sunlight streaming through a window I thought had been permanently darkened. One morning, as I was arranging freshly baked pastries in the shop, I realized something profound. The pain I had endured had taught me more than I could have imagined. It taught me vigilance without paranoia, love without naivety, and the courage to reclaim my life even when it seemed easier to surrender. I reached out to Laura once more, not to resume the closeness we once had, but to offer a path forward, one where she could acknowledge her mistakes, learn from them, and perhaps, one day, find her own balance. I didn't do it for reconciliation or for appearances. I did it because forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as anyone else. The house smelled of cinnamon rolls that morning, the sunlight warm on my arms. The house smelled of cinnamon rolls that morning, the sunlight warm on my arms. Michael's memory lingered, comforting rather than crushing. The bakery hummed with life, clients chatting happily, unaware of the storm that had passed behind the closed doors. And for the first time in months, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. Life was still messy, still unpredictable, but it was mine. And that, I realized, was everything. As I sit here now, watching the steam rise from my morning coffee and listening to the soft hum of the bakery, I can't help but reflect on everything that happened. Life has a way of testing us, of showing us who we can really trust, and what we are truly capable of. I never imagined that my own sister, someone I had protected and loved like a daughter, could betray me so completely. And yet, here I am, not broken but stronger. I've learned that love and trust are powerful, but they must be balanced with boundaries. Sometimes, protecting someone means also protecting yourself. It doesn't make us unkind or cold, it makes us wise. And sometimes, the people we think will stand by us the most are the ones we must watch most carefully. I want to leave you with this thought: betrayal hurts, deeply and personally, but it also teaches. It shows you where your strength lies, and it forces you to grow in ways you never expected. Reclaiming my life wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And in the process, I found not just justice, but a renewed sense of peace and purpose. Life will always have its storms. Family, friends, and loved ones may sometimes disappoint us. But even in the darkest moments, there is room for dignity, healing, and hope. And that hope, that resilience, is ours to claim. Would you have had the courage to face the betrayal the way I did? To stand firm, reclaim your life, and forgive without surrendering your boundaries? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more stories of real-life courage, heartache, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving betrayal. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to reclaim what is rightfully ours: our peace, our dignity, and our life. In the weeks after the confrontation, life gradually began to settle into a new rhythm, though not without its reminders. Every corner of the house, every familiar scent of vanilla from the bakery, every creak of the wooden floorboards seemed to echo the events of the past months. But instead of grief, I began to feel clarity, a calm awareness that I had survived something profoundly painful and emerged with my dignity intact. I focused on the bakery more than ever. Each morning, I woke early, the air still cool and crisp, and walked down the quiet streets to the shop. The scent of freshly baked bread, warm sugar, and spices became a sort of therapy, a gentle reminder that life continues, that creation can mend what was broken. I listened to the laughter of clients, the hum of machines, and the chatter of neighbors, small, ordinary moments that felt precious after months of tension and betrayal. One afternoon, while preparing a batch of apple pies, I reflected on Michael's absence. His presence had been a quiet, steady force in my life, and his loss had left me unmoored. Yet I realized that even in his absence, his lessons and love guided me, how he treated people with kindness, how he valued honesty, how he believed in me even when I doubted myself. Those memories became my anchor, reminding me that while Laura had tried to take everything, she could not touch the essence of who I was. I also re-established boundaries with Laura. She reached out several times, apologetic and cautious, attempting to rebuild some form of connection. I listened, acknowledged her words, but kept the boundaries firm. Forgiveness, I learned, does not require full reconciliation, it requires acknowledgement of truth, a clear separation between past betrayal and present peace. She could attempt to make amends, but the trust she had broken would take years, if it could ever fully heal. Some days I still felt pangs of grief and residual anger. I would catch myself thinking of the small ways she had tried to infiltrate my life, the friendly gestures that hid cunning intent, the casual advice that veiled manipulation. And yet, each time, I reminded myself that those feelings were natural, but they did not define me. I had reclaimed my life, my home, and my work. That was my victory. I also began reconnecting with my friends and family in deeper ways. Those who had supported me through the ordeal became a lifeline, reminding me that the love and trust one had cultivated over decades were not lost. There was something profoundly grounding in sharing meals with friends who had witnessed my struggle, in laughter and quiet conversations that reinforced the simple joys of life. In those moments, I started to understand the broader lesson. Life would always present challenges, often in the forms of people we trust most. But each betrayal carries the potential for growth. We can respond with rage, with withdrawal, or with measured action that asserts our dignity while maintaining our integrity. Choosing the latter is not easy, but it is profoundly empowering. I also revisited the bakery's future. Michael and I had always dreamed of expanding, of creating a small chain that could carry our vision forward. With renewed focus and determination, I began planning carefully, engaging loyal staff, streamlining operations, and reaching out to local suppliers. Each step forward was a reaffirmation of life, of creativity, of perseverance. Even at home, I made small but meaningful changes. I rearranged furniture in ways that reflected my renewed sense of control, placed photographs and mementos of my life and Michael's memory in spots where they could inspire rather than sadden. The house became a sanctuary once more, a place where I could breathe without fear, where every smell, sound, and touch reminded me that this life was mine to live. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, peace returned. It was not a loud, triumphant victory, it was quiet, steady, and deeply human. The bakery's ovens hummed each morning, the bread rising just so, the scent carrying through the streets like a gentle promise. My friends laughed, my neighbors stopped by to share small joys, and I began to find myself smiling at the ordinary, the morning sunlight, the warmth of a well-brewed cup of tea, the soft creak of the wooden floor under my feet. The betrayal by Laura had changed me, yes. But it did not define the remainder of my life. It became, instead, a lesson in vigilance, in asserting boundaries, and in reclaiming what is rightfully mine. It taught me that even when those closest to us falter, we can rise, rebuild, and create a life grounded in integrity, love, and resilience. Months passed, and the rhythm of life finally began to feel natural again. The bakery thrived, each day bringing a sense of accomplishment and renewal. I noticed how differently I navigated conversations now, with clarity, calm, and a quiet assertiveness that I hadn't known I possessed before. My interactions with Laura remained limited and civil, but I no longer allowed guilt or familial obligation to dictate my choices. One quiet morning, as sunlight filtered through the kitchen curtains and cast golden patterns across the wooden floor, I realized I had come to understand something profound. Betrayal, while deeply painful, can also illuminate our inner strength. I had discovered reserves of courage, patience, and strategic thinking that I had never needed before. The grief of Michael's passing and the shock of Laura's deceit had forged me into someone more resilient, someone capable of reclaiming her life without losing her dignity. I also reflected on forgiveness, not for Laura necessarily, but for myself. I forgave myself for trusting too easily, for not seeing the warning signs sooner, and for moments of doubt that had caused hesitation. Forgiveness allowed me to let go of lingering resentment and freed me to focus on growth rather than punishment. I began to understand that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of self-respect and the clarity to know where to draw the line. The bakery became more than a business, it became a symbol of resilience. Each loaf of bread, each batch of pastries, each warm smile exchanged with a client reinforced the fact that life could continue, even flourish, after betrayal. I started mentoring a few young women in the neighborhood, teaching them not only baking techniques, but also lessons in integrity, perseverance, and self-respect. It felt like a way of transforming my experience into something constructive, a gentle reminder that even painful experiences can create ripples of growth beyond ourselves. Occasionally, I would run into Laura in public spaces or at family gatherings. Each encounter was a small test, a chance to reaffirm the boundaries I had established. She sometimes tried to explain herself, offering partial apologies or excuses, but I had learned to listen without allowing her words to unsettle my peace. I nodded, responded politely, but did not allow the past to dictate my present. That was the real victory, the ability to interact without fear, anger, or lingering insecurity. I also began reconnecting with Michael's family in a deeper, more intentional way. We shared memories of him, honored his legacy in small rituals at the bakery, and supported each other in ways that strengthened our bonds. His presence, though absent, remained a guiding light, a reminder of the values he embodied and the love that had once filled our home. One evening, after a long day at the bakery, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The air was cool, carrying the distant scent of jasmine from the garden. I thought about the journey I had taken, the grief, the betrayal, the fight to reclaim what was mine, and the ultimate restoration of my life. It struck me that life is a series of choices, to succumb to hurt, to retaliate in anger, or to reclaim control with dignity and wisdom. I chose the latter, and in doing so, I found a quiet, profound happiness. Not happiness that ignores pain, but happiness that acknowledges it, learns from it, and allows it to guide us toward a better self. In these reflective moments, I also began to see Laura not simply as a villain, but as someone shaped by her own insecurities, desires, and misguided decisions. Understanding her motivations didn't excuse her actions, but it allowed me to release the weight of hatred and resentment. Compassion, even for those who hurt us, became part of my healing, not as weakness, but as a reinforcement of my strength. The bakery continued to flourish, my relationships deepened, and my sense of purpose solidified. I became more intentional in all aspects of life, in business decisions, in friendships, and in family matters. I realized that protecting what is ours is not just about possessions or property, but about preserving our emotional well-being, self-respect, and moral compass. And as I closed the shop each evening, the aroma of baked bread lingering in the air, I felt an enduring sense of peace. The betrayal that had once seemed insurmountable was now a chapter in a story of growth, resilience, and reclamation. Life had tested me, but I had met that test with courage, clarity, and calm, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not only what was mine, but also the strength to navigate whatever challenges might come next. As I sit here now, the bakery quiet after a long day, the warm smell of cinnamon and vanilla still lingering in the air, I can finally breathe, without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. The events of the past year, Michael's passing, Laura's deceit, the struggle to reclaim what was mine, feel like a distant storm, one I survived, stronger than I ever imagined. I think about trust, and how fragile it can be. How someone you have loved, someone you have protected, can turn those same bonds into a weapon against you. And yet, I also think about resilience, the quiet, steadfast strength that emerges when you refuse to be broken. I learned that protecting yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. It is how you preserve dignity, love, and life itself. Forgiveness became my anchor. Not the kind that erases wrongdoing, but the kind that frees your heart from the constant ache of resentment. I forgave myself for trusting too easily, for underestimating the potential for betrayal, and even, in small ways, for Laura, because holding on to anger only weighs us down. Healing is not about forgetting, it is about reclaiming peace, learning from the past, and moving forward without fear. I also realized the value of boundaries. Trust must be earned, and love must be balanced with respect. We cannot allow grief, kindness, or familial ties to blind us to reality. It is possible to care deeply for someone and still protect yourself from their missteps, intentional or otherwise. Life, I've discovered, is full of moments that test our patience, our courage, and our clarity. There will be those who disappoint us, those who seek to take advantage of our love, and those who challenge us in ways that shake our very foundation. But within those trials lies an opportunity to grow, to reclaim what is rightfully ours, and to emerge with a deeper understanding of who we are and what we value. The bakery has become a symbol of that reclaiming. Every loaf of bread, every batch of pastries, every smile exchanged with a client reminds me that life continues, and it can flourish even after heartbreak. I find joy in small, ordinary moments, the warm sun on the kitchen floor, the quiet hum of the oven, the laughter of neighbors who stop by for a treat. These simple experiences are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And so, I leave you with this thought: betrayal is painful, yes. But it can also reveal your inner strength, your ability to protect yourself, and your capacity for forgiveness. It is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of a life reclaimed, a heart strengthened, and a future chosen consciously and deliberately. Would you have had the courage to face betrayal the way I did? To reclaim your life with dignity, assert your boundaries, and move forward without letting anger or resentment define you? I'd love to hear your thoughts, share them in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more real-life stories of love, loss, betrayal, and resilience. Because in the end, we are all capable of rising above the storms that life places before us. We can reclaim our peace, rebuild our lives, and find strength even in the moments that once felt unbearable. And that, perhaps, is the truest form of victory. As I sit here tonight, the kitchen quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of crickets outside, I find myself reflecting on everything that has passed. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the struggle to reclaim what was mine, it all feels like a storm I weathered, leaving behind a sense of clarity and strength I never knew I had. I think back to the first moment I realized what Laura had been doing, sitting in my favorite chair, sipping tea like she belonged there, smiling at me with a mask I had trusted. My heart had broken then, and yet, I could not have imagined how much I would grow through this ordeal. I learned something profound: strength does not come from avoiding pain, but from facing it, acknowledging it, and choosing to rise above it. Trust is a fragile thing. We give it freely to those we love, often assuming it is unconditional. But I learned that love does not justify betrayal, and closeness does not excuse deception. Protecting ourselves, our hearts, our homes, our lives, is not selfish. It is necessary. It is how we honor ourselves and preserve our dignity, even when those we care for falter. Forgiveness, I've realized, is not about erasing the past. It is about releasing its hold over your present and future. I forgave myself for being too trusting, for underestimating the potential for betrayal, and even in small ways, I forgave Laura, not to condone her actions, but to free myself from carrying anger and resentment that could have weighed me down forever. In the months since, life has found its rhythm again. The bakery thrives, my relationships with friends and clients are stronger than ever, and my home feels truly mine once more. Each loaf of bread, each batch of pastries, every warm interaction reminds me that life continues, that we can rebuild, and that joy exists even after sorrow. These ordinary moments, sunlight on the floor, the smell of cinnamon rolls, laughter from neighbors, carry an extraordinary sense of peace and affirmation. Betrayal, I've learned, can illuminate our inner strength. It forces us to assert boundaries, reclaim what is ours, and confront reality with honesty and courage. It teaches us to recognize the people who truly support us, and to let go of those whose love is conditional or self-serving. And most importantly, it reminds us that we are capable of resilience, courage, and growth even in the face of profound hurt. So I leave you with this question: if someone you loved betrayed you, would you find the strength to reclaim your life with dignity, without letting anger or resentment define you? Would you protect your peace, assert your boundaries, and move forward while still holding on to compassion and integrity? I hope my story gives you courage, the courage to face betrayal, to reclaim what is yours, and to grow stronger through adversity. Life will test us all, sometimes painfully, but it is in those tests that we discover our true capacity for resilience, forgiveness, and hope. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, how would you have responded in my shoes? And if you want to hear more real-life stories of love, betrayal, redemption, and strength, please consider subscribing. Because in the end, reclaiming our lives is not just about possessions or property, it is about preserving our dignity, nurturing our heart, and choosing a future where peace and strength define us. And that, perhaps, is the most meaningful victory of all.